Haitian poet and novelist who writes in both French and Haitian Creole. As we were visiting the Italian exhibition today, I also came to know that he's a polymath and he also knows Italian very well, which was not part of this formal introduction. His works have been translated into several languages. He now divides his home between Paris and Port-au-Prince. He has received several prizes and awards for his work, among them a residency at the Villa Medici in Rome, the Grand Prix de la Lingua Française, Polish and Swiss Goncourt Choice 2019, the Goncourt des Lycées shortlist for the Mediterranean World, pardon my French, and the Prix Orange du Livre 2017, the Grand Prix du Roman de la Académie Française shortlist, and Prix Medici shortlist for his novel Avant que les hombres se effacent. Whatever, I can't pronounce that. He is also known to be an avid soccer fan. Trained in literature and journalism, Dalembert first worked as a journalist in his homeland before leaving Haiti in 1986 when he was only 23 years old. For France, where he obtained his PhD at the Sorbonne in comparative literature and a master's in journalism from the École Supérieure de Journalisme de Paris. Since then, he has traveled widely as a teacher and visiting poet and has taught briefly at the University of Wisconsin, the University of Berlin, University of Bern, and currently holds the Writer-in-Residence chair at the Sciences Po Paris. His poetry has been published in several major literary journals in the US, and Dalembert was a contributor to the recently released anthology And We Came Out and Saw the Stars Again, which was, I think, a collaboration with writers from around the world on the COVID-19 epidemic. So maybe we'll end with some of your poetry towards the end of the session. So today we're going to be talking of something very sensitive, and if I might draw your attention to the book that Dalembert has written, I think the purpose, he brings his journalistic ability of observing things, reality as it is, and also brings his literary skills of converting it into a beautiful narrative, a story that evokes a lot of empathy. So the job of the writer basically is to bring awareness to what is happening and do it in such a manner that it evokes empathy. You know, there's another writer, and we are doing this discussion in very unfortunate circumstances. We've just had 2 years of the lockdown where the virus became a wall that put us behind our pigeonhole existence. And also currently, because there is a war raging in Eastern Europe, and we are aware of the Ukrainian crisis which is happening. So this conversation is happening against a background of very, very difficult and tough circumstances. Yuval Noah Harari, who's also recently spoken about the Ukrainian crisis, writes in his book Homo Sapiens that the history of mankind is actually the history of migration. And you yourself have a lived experience of having migrated at the tender age of 23 from your homeland to France. So let us begin this conversation by asking you about your experience of migration from your homeland to a homeland that you now have adopted. Also the fact that you must have learned French when you came, or you probably knew it. So how does it work in terms of, working in a different land as an outsider, or that is how people must have viewed you? How was it to negotiate the space? And what does home mean for you in a globalized world? Because we call ourselves global citizens. What is the definition of home?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very well for receiving me here and for your attention. I feel not only very happy, but it's a great pleasure and honor for me to be here with you. And talking about your question, I'm a privilege with respect to migration. When I left Haiti, it's true I was young, but I came to France. But I came to France as a student. I even came to France as a simple migrant, as a simple refugee. And as a student, it was easier for me, even if I faced some problems too. It's not very important respect to the problem that a refugee can face. It's completely different, And I've been in France, first of all, in the East. And the real problem I had it wasn't cultural shock. It was respect to the weather. Because when I came to France in '86, it was one of the coldest period in France. It was -20, -22, because I came from Haiti, 33 degrees, and I went to the east of France in Nancy, and the weather was -20, -22. It was a real shock for me, and because I think it was a major problem I had. For the rest of the time, it was like for every student. I didn't have a fellowship, so I had to work to pay my study, but it's not so complicated as expected. But when we are talking about migration, I think it's the same thing, for example, when I'm talking about exile. Often people say that I'm an exile writer. I don't consider myself like an exile writer because I can go back to Haiti every time I want. It's like for me, exile is something linked to politics. For example. When I'm talking about migration, often I think about forced migration. The story of mankind is very linked to migration. You have a lot of problems that can force you to emigrate. War, for example, earthquake, or drought, or flood, or or politics. You have nowadays a lot of persons in the world they can live in their countries because they have to escape from something. They escape, I don't know what, but I'm not. It's true. The economical situation in Haiti is not so good, but I can go back, stay, I don't know, 1, 3, or 6 months if I want. Nobody tells me that you have the right to be there. So there is no comparison. There is no comparison between my situation and the situation of thousands or millions of migrants in the world. But nevertheless, I'm still living, abroad. When I say abroad, I'm not living in my native land. I've been living, as you say, in France since 1986, but not only in France. I've been living in Italy for a long time. I lived also for 1 year and a half in Berlin, in Germany. I've been living in Israel and in the Middle East. So I can see the face, if I could say like this, of migration. I can see the face of different types of migration, for example. But you talk about journalism. It's true, I worked as a journalist even before I left Haiti. I learned doing the job before to go to a school of journalism in Paris. And it serves. I learned a lot from that practice of journalism. For example, to write a book like The Mediterranean War, I felt the necessity to go, to be on field. And I went to Lampedusa. I don't know if everyone knows about Lampedusa. It's a small island, but Italian island in the Mediterranean, but very, very close to Africa, where the refugees coming crossing the Mediterranean arrive, a lot of them. So that problem exists at least, have been existing for at least 25 years. People coming from Africa or people traveling from the Middle East to Africa, and then from Africa across the Mediterranean to come to Europe. And once they are in Lampedusa, okay, they are in Europe. And but in that novel, I felt the need, the necessity to go there, to speak to people, to speak to the refugees, but to speak also to the association, to the Italian association, for example. They are struggling to facilitate. How do you say, accueil, the reception of those. To welcome those refugees. And very, very interesting, because normally you have, in those cases, your own population is not only one, it's divided. There's a part of the population who want to welcome those refugees, and you have a part of the population who doesn't welcome those refugees. And Lampedusa is a very small island. It's a very, very small island, not even. And normally, during the winter, I think there are something like 500 people, but during the summer, it's a touristic island. There's a lot of people coming from Europe, and the island is completely divided between those who want to welcome those refugees and those who don't want to welcome those refugees. And I could talk to the refugees, but to the women. For me, it was very important to talk to the women, and because I want that novel, the main characters, the three main characters are women, was very important. And I thought, and they told me a lot of stories. The story of violence, story of also the story of joy too, because they were received by part of the population. For example, I meet an old man, a very old man, and he used to help those young ladies coming from Eritrea, coming from Nigeria, and those women, when finally réussi,
the success.
I mean, yes, when they succeed, to be received finally by the at a political level or the administrative level, until they travel to Germany, they travel to England, they travel to Denmark or Switzerland, but every time those women had a baby, they came back to Lampedusa and to receive how do you say, benediction of that old man who helped them. And it was a very amazing story. It was that old man was very proud to see me, his sons, his daughters, grandson and granddaughters. I have a lot of grandson and granddaughter, and it was very amazing. For me, it's also that keep our faith in the human being. When you see, for example, an old man like this, he wasn't rich. He was just common people, but he felt the necessity to help the others. And for me, it was very interesting. And the reason why I wrote that novel with women like French main characters.
No, we will. No, we will talk about the characters and also the story in brief without revealing the major plot. But I was also thinking, it's quite by serendipity, or maybe it's by some kind of what Elizabeth Gilbert says, that this kind of a thought comes to everybody to look at reality and to be able to write. So a lot of literature. In fact, last year, 2021, the Nobel Prize for Literature was given to a gentleman from Tanzania, Abdul Razak, who's probably also speaking at JLF this season. And it was given to him for writing about the Gulf crises and how people have negotiated different cultures. The migrants have negotiated different cultures and different civilizations. Then in the same space, very recently, an author of Indian origin, Amitabh Ghosh, he has written a book which is very delightful called The Nutmeg's Curse. And there he's also talking of how colonization impacted the Banda Island in Indonesia, when all the tribal people were exterminated just for the sake of the spices, the nutmeg which grows exclusively in the Banda Islands, and the cloves, and how the spices, that is how the flora and fauna also got impacted, and how migration happened because of that. So climate change leading to migration. You talk in your novel also about climate change. You talk about unstable political conditions. You talk about how somebody wanted to escape from the civil strife which was happening. You also talk about unemployment in the place, and to go to another country for better opportunities for the future, putting at stake the present, knowing that there will be exploitation in the way. So that is very important. Also, I think the Syrian crisis were covered by Khalid Hosseini of the Kite Runner fame, and he wrote a book called The Sea Prayer. It was a tribute to the little boy whose pictures we all must have seen, Alan Kurdi, who died in one of those boat journeys on the Mediterranean Ocean. And I think probably you make a small mention in Momo, the character that you refer. So there's so much of literature which is happening. I mean, when I was doing a little research, I found that so much of literature is happening on migration. Closer home, India, when India gained its independence in 1947, we had almost 2 to 3 million people move across the border. So we also have a lived experience of generations of having traversed that kind of migration because of freedom. I mean, of course, Bangladesh in the neighborhood, Parsis who fled Iran because of persecution, Jews, of course, we know. And there's another very interesting thing which happened in India, which makes me ask you the next question: the hierarchy in terms of migration. That is my question. So when the brain drain happened in India in the age, in the late 70s and 80s, when we had the computer and the communication revolution happening, the Silicon Valley was populated. But the way people from the original native country look at people who went for employment in the Silicon Valley, that gaze of the country is very different. Like you also mentioned, my experiences of a privileged person who went to study abroad. But what about people who cross, say, the Mexican wall, are illegal migrants, enter the country because of persecution happening? They are not writers in exile, for example. Of course, many Russian writers have been exiled. Chinese writers of late have been exiled. There are a lot of people who reach shores, in fact, closer home, after the Anthem cyclone which happened in 2020, in the lockdown period. A lot of people from Bangladesh, Sundarbans, which is area in the west in the country, have migrated through the Libyan route, the same thing that you mentioned in your book, from India and Bangladesh, and are still roaming somewhere. And that Amitabh Ghosh has actually spoken to those, interviewed those people in his book. So my question to you, sir, is that how do you see the migrants searching for their identity? Because identity is a double-edged sword. Your identity can also help you bind, but identity, the underbelly of identity, can also help you exclude the other. So how do you see this, and what is your take, given there's so much of literature and talk happening about migration and identity. How do you link this whole concept of identity with migration?
Yes, it's a very important question. And when we think about migration, yesterday I was talking about the concept of identity and belonging, for example, the difference between identity and belonging. For me, okay, I will make a difference between those terms. The identity is something we have deep inside. It's something we took or we learned also from our education, from family, from religion also if you have one, if someone has one, and from your country, and everywhere you go, I mean, you're supposed to travel like a sea turtle with your identity with you. But as you said, identity can serve to exclude also the others. I just want to be among us, as you say. Just without the others. Identity can serve to exclude them. For example, when you are talking about the wall, you have the wall, the build between United States and Mexico, and in 1989, everyone thought that after the Berlin Wall fell down, everyone said, never more, never more, never more. But the story of human being is also the story of separation, of partition, because we always want to be different. When I said that our ancestors weren't sedentary. They used to go before us here and there. But after it took a long time to humankind, to settle down and to begin to build borders and to build a wall also, nevertheless. It's not only the wall, for example, you are talking about the wall between the United States and Mexico, or between now, even in Haiti, the island of Haiti in the Caribbean, we have two countries in that island. Now, Dominican Republic, they speak Spanish and Haitian, we speak Haitian, Creole, and French. And now they are beginning to build a wall between Haiti and Dominican Republic. It's a small island. You have the war between Israel and Palestine, and a lot of war like this, because it's the story of humankind, And no, when I think there is another possibility. It's not so easy to reach it. It's not so easy because human being is always has fear. Actually, we have fear when we decide to build a wall. That means I have fear. I don't feel safe. We have to hear that also. And but I prefer, for example, when I'm thinking about that, I prefer to think about that old men in Lampedusa who welcome the migrant, the migrant, and but as foreigner, if I can say like this, I don't consider myself like my identity, that the fact I've been living in France or in Italy, I didn't lose my identity. But I think I can also live what I took from France or what I took from Italy as an enrichment. For me, I know I can say now I'm rich which I don't have only one homeland. I can say in France I feel at home too, and in Italy I feel at home. So in other countries, in some part, in some way, in the United States, because as a nation, I have, as many nations, you do have family and friends in the United States or in Canada. But for me, it's a kind of enrichment. And I understand the fact you mentioned about, the poor migrants. I wasn't rich, and I'm still not. But the migrant who cross the Mediterranean to come to Europe and who doesn't speak the language, who doesn't, it's totally different for me. When I came to France, I speak French. I was speaking French, because I grew up with speaking French. So I don't have problem with that. But I can understand that the migrant, once you travel, for example, you travel for a reason. You travel because, okay, there is a war, there is an earthquake, there is some kind of troubles, and you have to travel. And once you come where you want to come, there is a kind of fear, because you have fear to lose the little pieces of your identity, of your country that you left behind. You have that kind of fear. And the first impression when you arrive there, the first impression, there is a French writer that is from Martinique, he's the Caribbean also, Edouard Glissant. The first impression, or the first sensation you have once you come there, is what Edouard Glissant called the impulse of return, because you are in a new place, a new environment. Once in a while you don't know the language, you don't know people. You see the other people like something aggressive, and if they are not aggressive, And the first impression you have is that impulse to return. But you can't return. You can't return because you made a lot of sacrifice to cross, to travel, because once in a while some people sold their small piece of land, they sold their small house, for example, they sold everything to travel. So they can't come back. But nevertheless, I think after a certain time, the problem you can have after maybe 20 years, 25 years, is that being, I'm not from behind anymore, but I'm still not from there, because there they don't consider me like being a part of them. You can have that kind of problem, because when, for example, you come back to your country, but people say you can't understand because you weren't there. They don't accept your intervention with respect to the, if you have, it's happened to me often when, for example, I'm talking about a Haitian problem or Haitian political problem. You say, but you can understand, you don't live there anymore, you left, etc. It's very, it can be frustrating. It can be frustrating, but I think at the end it's an enrichment. For example, I've been living in France, and I said you have a part of the population in France coming from North Africa, and facing once in a while racism in France with things like this. And once in a while, people can say to them, "Go back where you're from," but they are not from Algeria, they are not from Morocco, they are not from anymore, because when they travel to Morocco or to France or Algeria. In Algeria and France, they ask them, when are you going back to your country? That means in France. But you are still in between. At the beginning, you are still in between. But you can stay in between all your life is if you don't decide at a certain moment to say, okay, the fact, okay, I traveled, or my family traveled, but I was born in France or I was born in, I don't know where, I don't know, in the United States, but they don't have the right to ask me to go back because now I'm here. And there is a writer, slammer, an old slammer, is originally from Jamaica, but raised in England, and his name is LKJ. I don't know if you know him, it's Linton Kwesi Johnson. And Linton Kwesi Johnson is older than me, and when he's talking about migration, and you can see it in YouTube, for example, he has a very, very wonderful piece that says, we are here to stay. I mean, we are not going back. And you know, once you accept that fact, okay, I'm here, and maybe I can go, I can travel, I think you understand a lot of things, and also respect to your identity. You know who you are. When you know that, okay, I'm here, I'm in France, or I'm in Italy, or I'm in Haiti, but I'm here to stay. I'm not going back anywhere. And once you interpret that concept, that notion, I think you feel in peace with yourself. And if you are in peace with yourself, you can be in peace with the others.
No, that's absolutely right. There is a huge paradox, in fact, in what you've just said, and which is acceptable. You spoke of fear. There's an Indian poetry in the vernacular, which is called Ek Boon, written by Hari Om Upadhyay. He's an Indian writer. And he writes that, when the drop of rain is deciding to fly out from the cloud, it also has the same fear which probably a person who leaves this country has, and he doesn't know that drop of rain doesn't know whether it will fall in the desert sand and get dissolved and disappear, or whether it will become part of an oyster shell and turn into a pearl. So that is, I've just translated the poetry, I'm sure a lot of people here know about it. So that fear, I think, even the inanimate objects kind of carry. But interestingly, what you've spoken is, I want to ask you something different. You've spoken about identity is your own. Belongingness can happen if the country accepts you, right? My question is that, if you stay in your own, I'm also a product. When people ask me, where do you belong? My dad was in a transferable job. He never laid, and before he could lay anchor, he probably lay anchor up in the heavens. So we didn't have a place which I could say, point and say, okay, this is my ancestral place. So when people ask me, I feel like a migrant. So then I turned it into an advantage and say, I own every place, just like you. My question is that people who have never gone out of their country, does their existence not become like a frog in the well? They have had no experience, no exposure of what's happening in the outside world, while they may be rooted. So I sometimes envy people who say that I am from an X city and they can write beautifully about that city. And I never had that. So that is one thing. I want you to hold on to that thought. The other thought, and this is from an individual's point of view. The other thought is from the country's point of view. And I'll just give you an example. And I want you to answer how success enables countries to accept you. What happens when India has had a lot of rain, So very recently, professor from India who went abroad took a US citizenship, married a spouse of a different nationality. When he gets a Nobel Prize, suddenly there is a clamor in India. He belongs to us, till now, the very reason that forced that gentleman to leave India, better opportunities, non-acceptability, privileged. But the moment he becomes successful, the whole country wants to claim him and own him. So do you think success has some kind, allows you, also creates a hierarchy amongst migrants? One side we are talking of illegal, undocumented, migrants who settled, who were able to do anonymous, remained anonymous, but happy, didn't have any problems. But then there are those migrants who become successful. What happens? What feeling? You are fairly successful. I mean, we are talking to you at JLF, which is the Mecca of literature. You are here at JKK. So how do you see the success? How do you see the Haitian government? I'm sure the presidents must be calling you and say, okay, you must be a country guest or something when you go back to your country. So how does it feel? How do you negotiate that space? And how do you look at people who've never left Haiti, who don't understand your global perspective?
Yes, I can understand that anyway. When I'm talking about fear, I'm talking about fear of both sides. I mean, the people who travel, and I'm, for example, if I travel in a new country, okay, I cannot feel because I don't know the language, I don't know the culture, I don't know, the words, I don't know the code of that new country. Okay, I can have feel because I don't know. And but the people who receive, who never travel, for example, they have fear also because you are like they call it foreigner. And the story of the humanity, the foreigner is the barbarian. And it's because we used to put borders, you used to put borders, or how do you say that, doors, in the ancient cities, for example, they had those kind of doors, so you close the door and the foreigner can't penetrate, So there are fear in both sides. And you can understand that. But even if I understand, it's true, there are also some persons, they don't accept the difference, every kind of difference. It's not only because my color of skin are different from yours, it's not only because I speak another language. It could be because, okay, I am a man, you are a woman. I am heterosexual, you are homosexual. I don't know, because human being is always looking for something, some reason to exclude the other. And it's part of our humanity, if I can say that. And once we know that and we accept that, I think we made a very, very big step, to accept the fact that, okay, that people, that man or that woman who speaks another language, who doesn't speak Creole like me, or doesn't speak French, is a human being. And he can have exactly the same problem I faced, for example, in my country. But, and if I know that, I accept that, I think I made a very, very grand step, Okay, it's not the same thing. I understand perfectly what you said about the man other prize, and the same thing happens everywhere. For example, in Haiti, we did have that debate for years and years about the double citizenship. The double citizenship, Haitian people can accept, for example, the fact that you are born Haitian, but if you have a new citizenship, you lose your Haitian citizenship. And during, for example, during the Second World War, Haiti took a little part of that war helping Jews who want to escape from Europe. But they asked them to how do you say, renoncer, to decline their own citizenship, their own citizenship, to take the Haitian citizenship. And all the debate. But those Haitians, for example, Haiti is a small country. We do have a very large diaspora in the United States and in Canada, or even in Dominican Republic. They don't, if we have the political debate about citizenship, they're going to say, okay, they refuse the Haitian citizenship, but now they are American or they're Canadian, okay, that's the problem. They don't have the right to vote, and we don't accept the double citizenship. But those people who say that, if they can live, for example, it's thanks to the diaspora who send money everywhere, a third part of the Haitian budget every year. So that's the contradiction you can have, and for them, it's you don't have the right to be Haitian anymore, but they do accept your money. So that's I mean, that's the point. Or once you have something, for example, they say, okay, it's very important this way. They feel concerned also. We have in United States, if you know that that singer who was part of the group Fugees, both of them are Haitian, and the other one, the girl, was from the United States. The Haitian people were very proud because the guy from Fugees is very, very important guy, well known in all over the world, etc. But when that guy tried to come back to Haiti to become president, they didn't accept, But that the contradiction we can have as people. But for myself, I think that we have to keep struggling for more tolerance, for more respect of the others. It's going to take time. We have to do our part. Every generation has to do its part, and it's a very, very long struggle to have that kind of respect between simply human beings, between men and men, men and women, or black and white, or I don't know, Haitian and Dominican. It's a very long struggle, but we have to do it step by step. And our will, or my will, is to keep fighting for that kind of respect, because that respect that makes me a human being. If I respect the other, and I can ask respect for it too.
Yeah, so you're right, because Hegel, the great historian and philosopher, he also said that the history of mankind is the history of struggle for recognition, and the poor have the least visibility. So while Haiti might say that we want your money, sir, we don't want you. So that, I think, is linked to how we allow economics to negotiate the world. The question is two very important writers, Francis Fukuyama, who was also my teacher. I did a course with him in Stanford. And Amy Chua, who's written a book called Political Tribes. And Francis Fukuyama has written a book called Identity. And they're saying that the man's basic instinct is to come together as a political tribe. Man has very, very political, tribal kind of instincts. And because of that, he also mentions the example of America, the American exceptionalism, where there is no citizenship by ancestry. There is this shared identity of belonging to the Constitution. So that is very different from every other place. And you've mentioned citizens. Now that we are in the middle of the conversation, and we have discussed very erudite topics about what is home in a global world, what is migration, there is a hierarchy, and there is also, you mentioned very rightly, sir, diaspora. So the diaspora is very different from the displaced. A diaspora becomes a diaspora because it has the ability to negotiate and form connections. Connections are based on economics or some cultural identity, but a displaced is anonymous. People don't even know. It's like a missing name, so it's neither in Haiti, kind of purgatory. My question is that you mentioned in your book, and his book has a lot of metaphors, and very, very common metaphors, and the COVID has taught us that we are all in the same boat. You mentioned that. So talk a little bit about the various characters of your novel, because you have very nicely, what I liked about the book is that you picked 3 continents, 3 characters, a female gaze to the story, and also talk about the metaphor of the boat, the metaphor of the Mediterranean Sea. What you have also done in the book, and I'd like you to answer that question for us, is that you have thrown some light on the various kinds of exploitation, which is a very, very difficult part, but you have kind of you've just done it in a very matter-of-fact way. So why did you choose to do it? Because I think that evoked the most empathy in me, and still your book ends in hope. So cover the characters, the continents, the female gaze, the metaphor of the boat, and how did you negotiate? And I think that's a very beautiful balance. And in some interview I read you speak about the middle passage. So tell us, how did you balance the literary writer part with the journalist part, which is, I think, the beauty of the book, which I really deeply appreciate and admire.
Thank you so much. You made my day. And no, it's very important to talk about those characters because they are women. And I did it. Have chosen women because they don't talk so much about women refugees. I mean, at least among those who cross the Mediterranean, and half part of them, even a little bit more. I mean, 52% are women, and subject to a lot of violence, as you can imagine. And the other refugees are subject to violence, but they have also, women, they are subject to also sexual violence, for example. And normally, at least, I'm from a culture, I'm from a story where the women are the stone corner. They are very important in the family. Once in a while, because the men escape, or once in a while because the men travel to United States or to Canada to try to send money to his family, or things like this. So the women are the stone corner of that side. So when the women begin to travel also, to escape also, that means the situation is very, very tough, it's very difficult, And I wanted to be, if I can say, the voice of those women. And the reason why we are talking about empathy, for me it's very important that kind of empathy. I mean, I can be a man talking about women. I can be a black man talking about a white man. Because that white man or that woman is part of mankind, it's part of humanity. And once in a while I can have, you just say that you were studying in Stanford, United States. So one of the problems I can have with United States is that kind of hashtag own voices, and that means if I'm not black, I can't talk about black men. And one of the North American writers, Madison Smart Bell, who wrote forward for the novel in English, he said that in the United States it would be impossible, for example, for a man nowadays, before it was possible, but now it was difficult for men to write and to have that kind of empathy with women. It would be impossible for someone who didn't cross the Mediterranean and talking about refugees, because you're supposed to be the only one to speak only about yourself. And when you speak only about yourself, for me, is a kind of contradiction of human being, of mankind. You know, that means your problem, it doesn't concern me. It's not mine. But I think the problem, your problem is mine, and mine is yours. You know, I was talking this morning with one of the story about John Donne. You all know that poet and ethnographer from England. It was, I think, he's from the 17th century, and he said that no human being is an island for itself. Everyone is a part of the continent. Every one of you is a part of the continent. So I can understand the problem you face. I can have empathy to being in empathy with you, even if I'm not you. And I think it's the most important thing for me. So in the novel, when I took 3 women coming from 3 different parts, speaking 3 different languages, having 3 different religions. One of them are Muslim, another one is Jewish, the other one is Catholic. And I literally put them in the same boat, but in different places. Because one of the problems we do have, okay, religion problem, I mean, gender problems or skin color problems there. But one of the problems we do have, for example, in a country like United States, is the class problem. It is a class problem, you know. When you have money in that country, you can do everything you want, more or less, you know. And now the problem becomes politics for me. And if they prevent me, for example, to talk about women, if they prevent me to talk about Hispanic or Asiatic or about white men, if they prevent me to talk about who is not me, it's easier for the other to comment. You know, they have I mean, the director, like in the movie, you know. But if I say, okay, it's a black man, it's not my problem. It's a woman, it's not my problem. I'm a man. It's a white man, it's not my problem. I'm a man. But we do have just above some person. They can take advantage from that separation, from the partition, you know, because we can't make only one people, only one folk, you know, and it's the reason why in that novel I put Shoshana, Dima, Sema. They are from different countries, they are different. Dima is a little bit racist, but at the end, she accepts, she understands the others. And the others understand her also. And I'm always looking for that kind of solidarity, that kind of empathy between human beings. And if I have only one word I have to say, for example, when I'm writing, one thing I'm looking for, I think, I don't say that literature or art has to be useful. I don't say that. It's not the point. but I think I'm trying to say something. To say something is very important for me. And those characters, and that's something I'm trying to say, is empathy with, solidarity with the women, empathy between being human beings, between religion, and to say that we are in the same boat. If the boat sinks, the first class, the second class, the third class, everyone is going to die. And it's so evident. It's so evident, but we refuse to accept it. And until the end of my life, I'm going to say that.
So I'm just going to read something from your book, just to tell the audience how beautifully you put it down, and the fact that you had a very women-centric gaze in your novel is what endeared me to the novel. So he writes on page 292, never mind the color of their skin, their ethnicity, their social status, or their religion, whether they were unbelievers, believers in one or many gods. If the boat were going to capsize, the Mediterranean wouldn't distinguish between those in the hold and those on the deck. We are all humans. I think that, the whole concept of humanity is what he has been able to very nicely evoke in the book. And let me make a very absolute confession here, that 2014 and 2015, we have been watching the Syrian crisis, especially through the lens of the news and the photographers. And I clearly, distinctly remember when I read that the various boats and the rescue operation that happened, it evoked a kind of a nostalgia. Nostalgia is a good thing. I don't know whether I can exactly use it. But it was taking me back to those very, very difficult times that people must have had, especially the moment you introduce Momo. There's a little boy in the novel, and I immediately could picture Alan Kurdi. So I think that you've really succeeded in evoking that empathy, and when French Embassy reached out to me wanting to do this and I read the book, I was so grateful that I'd had this opportunity to do this conversation with you. So migration in many ways, as he writes, has become a leveler. It levels you. So Dima comes from a slightly privileged background, and they're on the same boat, and it really doesn't matter. And the COVID, I think, also told us, the COVID also taught us that we are all in the same boat. So if we don't have solidarity with human beings as human beings, if we don't have sisterhood of women or of human beings, then we are putting ourselves into trouble. My next question is, and I'll also encourage people to think, because we are nearing the end of a conversation, and I'll ask the audiences to also have questions for the author. There are two aspects I'd like to touch. One is what has piqued my interest, seeing the kind of disasters that we face, be it the disasters brought about by climate change or disasters. And in fact, Ukraine, the crises that happened in Ukraine and the image which is happening right now, and the image of people having to migrate, I would say to move out of the country, maybe not migration, I really don't know how it will pan out. But some of the people I saw saying that we will not board the plane till our pets are allowed to be taken.
Yes.
When you are forcefully abandoned by your country, or you have to abandon and carry everything of your life in a suitcase. And we've seen that in India during the COVID times also. People carrying their children and everything. There was this intra-migration that happened because of the lockdown. So one is that, we've spoken about human beings and we have empathy about human beings, but we also live in the age of PETA, and human rights and stuff which extend not to just human beings, but also to trees, to animals. What is your take on how the animals negotiate this whole concept of being abandoned by their owners. When the owners also, have to migrate and they can only carry as much, when they're having to leave behind your pets, having to leave behind, because I read recently in the news today that the zoo, the animals in the Ukrainian zoo are facing so much of problem. One ostrich abandoned its baby because of the noise and the shelling. We don't understand when you talk of war, what it does to people who can't speak, who can't articulate. So that is my one question. The other is that, as a policy maker, this is my question as a policy maker, we've spoken so much about the well-being of human beings. We are speaking of the Human Development Index. We are, looking at Bhutan as a template for the Happiness Development Index. The virus also focused us to shift from health, only health, to general well-being, which includes your physical, mental, emotional, and also spiritual well-being. Migration and mental health. That is a topic which policymakers have not really thought about. There are no facilitation centers, there is no hand-holding happening, and we don't realize how it impacts institutions of the family, of the home, of marriages, of relationships, much before it begins to impact in the kind of, say, terrorism or militarization of the society and the nation. So what is your take, and what advice would you give, because you're a writer holding a very powerful instrument in your hand. So tell us something about people who can't voice their opinion, which is the animals, and also migrants. I'm just thinking, if the migrants are also displaced, undocumented, they are equivalent. Are they equivalent to animals who can't voice, or are we not listening enough?
Yes, it's a very difficult question, but I do confess I didn't think about animals. I'm very sincere about that. It's a real problem also, because when you are escaping from something, it's you are, unfortunately, you think about yourself or about your family, and you don't even think about other human beings. You're just thinking about you and your family, and that's all. And people doesn't think about animals, and animals are part of ourselves. And I'm not saying that because you evoked that question, because we can't. When we live in a country, we need animals. We need, for example, if we take one legend, more or less everyone knows through the world, it's the legend of Noah in the Ark. And in the legend of Noah in the Ark, for example, what he did. He took his family, he took his son, the wives of his son, and so, and he took also animals, because he knew that they are part of us. When I'm talking about solidarity, when I'm talking about empathy, we're supposed to have empathy also for the animals. But the fact is, when, you were talking about before professor of philosophy, and in philosophy we always have that kind of question between culture and nature, for example, between us and the others, and we think, but we are wrong, that we don't need the others, we don't need the nature. Or, for example, when we have an earthquake, when we have climate change, in the novel, for example, Shoshana is who escaped from climate change in the country. And when we talk about climate change, we talk about, I don't know, earthquake, about hurricanes, for example. I'm coming from a land, not only Haiti, but the Caribbean, where we have a lot of hurricanes. You know, hurricanes are part of our story. I could even say as part of our identity. We do have earthquake also. We can't control, nature. We are trying. We do our best, but it's impossible. And the climate change is one of the reason we do have more and more refugees, and we're going to have more and more refugees because of the climate change. And so it's the reason why when I talk about Noah and the ark, you are completely right about the animals. You know, but because the first thing he did, okay, I take my family, I take my whole family, but I had to take the animals also because we need the animals. I'm sure that we need more the animals than the animals need us.
Okay, and this probably will be my last question before I throw it open to the audience. There was this film that I watched a few years back. It was made on the World War II. What happened during the World War II? It was called The Monuments Men. It was about how the Nazis were trying to destroy all the artifacts and the heritage in terms of paintings that were there in France. And there was a small team of the Monuments Men which was made to try and do an espionage kind of action to retrieve those, to ensure that those things don't fall. So there was a dialogue in the movie which says that you can kill all the men that you want. I'm paraphrasing it, I don't remember it. But it says you can kill all the men, all the human beings. But if you destroy the symbols of civilization, which is like the Bami and Buddha getting destroyed, then you take away from people the very fact that they ever existed in history. So migration, when I was looking at migration, identity, you very rightly spoke about identity is our own, nobody can take it from us. Wherever we will stand, it's like the typical Amitabh Bachchan dialogue, मैं जहाँ खड़ा हो जाता हूँ, line से शुरू होती है, kind of a thing, just translating it, that my identity is my own. But belongingness happens because there is an expectation of wanting people to fit in the culture, fit in terms of the cuisine. But then also, because of this process of acculturation which happens, there is multiculturalism that happens. The Portuguese brought this whole concept of the curdling of the milk to Bengal, and that is why we have the chena bora, the sweet in Bengal, which to them they say is theirs. They don't give any credit, no copyrights to the Portuguese. Similarly, in Jaipur, you saw the blue pottery today. So that came to us from Persia when the Parsis fled and the artists came in the Mughal courts. But today, we've owned it. Today it's Jaipur and nobody can tell us that it doesn't belong to us. We have a GI that says that it is Jaipur. So speak a little about that, what happens if you take away? People will die, new people will come. Death is natural in human beings. But if you take away our symbols of what it means to have lived, the legacy of what human beings do, how does migration take away that kind of a thing? Because it takes away your land, it takes away your acceptability in one land. You're not very sure whether you will be accepted. So you are kind of in a purgatory of land. You're a global citizen. You're well exposed. But you are so above the mediocre that you are neither accepted in your country back, nor there. So what is your take on that?
The fact that when you are migrating, you lose everything. I didn't understand why. Sorry, I didn't understand why.
So
So my question is, when you are migrating, right? There is a part of you that gets lost. The country, the negotiation with the country makes something out of you. When you leave that at a tender age, you know you are a Haitian because they call you in America. They say you are an American, you are a Chinese American or an American Chinese. You are an American Indian. You are an American African. So that always you keep. You know, it's like the stone which gathers moss. You know, so you are Haitian. You lived in Italy, so you are Italian. You know the language. So does it add to the process of building this culture, or it doesn't distract from you? Does it take away, or does it add?
Yes. Having living in France for a long time, I would say, spontaneously, they don't add, they take away. But because I have a problem, it's normal to recognize the origins of someone, and it's normal to accept the fact that not only we do have that problem in France, it's the problem between universalism, what we have in France, versus cosmopolitan, cosmopolitan, or multicultural origin and things like this. We don't have that problem in France. But I think in the United States, for example, they push over that kind of problem, and they push what I was trying to say before when I was talking about those little pieces they do, and with those little pieces, I don't feel forming part of a large group as a nation, for example. I think, for example, I am black before being North American, or I am gay before being a man, or I am a lesbian before being a woman. And but I don't know. I think they push over the time, and it's one of the reasons they have so many problems with the communities, because you're supposed to find a community, a small community, and a community that becomes smaller and smaller day after day. Once at the beginning I was a man. After I'm a black. After I'm a black gay. After that I'm a black gay but living in a certain part of New York, for example. It's I think they push over that thing. And I can feel, for example, they talk now about cisgender. Okay, you're supposed to have a shame because I love women. No, I just love women. That's, for me, it's natural. You know what I'm saying? They push the problem, I think, over. And at the same time, in France, they don't want to recognize either that kind of problem. They think just only a class problem. It's not only a class problem because it exists also that kind of intolerance, that kind of unrespect for the others, the kind of racism, for example. And so the problem is how to manage all those concepts, those things. How I feel, or do I feel just a human being? And a human being with my difference, with what I can be, and it's difficult, and I confess it's very difficult to manage all those things. But I will say it again and again. We have over our mankind, our humanity, and that's all. And we're supposed to fight for that. I know it's not because you are from a different part, or you are another sexuality, a sexuality different than I, because you are from another gender. I don't know, you are different. No, you are not different. The problem you face here in India is the same problem I can face in France, or I can face in Haiti, or I can face everywhere, because you are a human being. It seems evident. It seems even stupid saying that. But once in a while, I think we forget that simple fact that we are all human beings, that's all.
Yeah, you are absolutely right. I think we should remember it is very difficult to make society inclusive because there is so much of diversity, and diversity has happened because we've complicated ourselves by adding to all those objectives. You didn't add, sir, I'm a young, black,
Yes,
and then also the profession, techie.
I would like to say just one thing. You know, when they insist about diversity, to prevent us to make only one nation or only one folk, or only, you know, and if they prevent us to make only one nation, it's easier for them to control it, to control, everything. And it's the reason why I think it's very important to try to fight to make nation, to make, one folk, to make one humanity. Because if I feel concerned when you are sick or when you have a problem, if you feel concerned when I have a problem, you become a part of me and I become a part of you. And they can't divide us, you know, just to take profit, to take advantage. Because, I'm not one of the brutal aspect of capitalism we do face here in the world today. It's that we have what they call the financial capitalism, for example. It's one of the brutal faces of economic problems we do have in the world. And they can have, I think it's, when I hear, for example, that one person can buy an entire country, you know, for me it's something awful. I can accept that. I don't want to imagine things like this. And I think one of the financial capitalism we're facing in the Western country, not only in the Western country, because it's the same in India, it's the same even in China, that's that kind of problem we face now. And it's easier for them also to say, okay, you are just a little piece and I am. I'm just one man. I can buy a country with his entire people. You know, I don't know if people can imagine that. For me, it's just unacceptable.
No, so some people get packed on the boats and some people get packed in boxes. And the boxes are, I'm a Christian, I'm a Jew, I'm a Sikh, I'm whatever. So as Benedict Anderson very rightly pointed out, that all these boxes are nothing but imagined communities. The nation is also an imagined community. Religion is also an imagined community. So I think if we have to only have some creativity in imagination, as you very rightly pointed out, that creativity should be the creativity of what human beings are capable of becoming in the larger universal set of mankind. And that is what we should all focus on. So the book ends on a note of hope, and I'm very, very happy to have been in conversation with you, sir, today. Since you are a poet and you've written about COVID times, would you want to recite something in English for our audience? Something, I'm sure, of course, it would have been in translation, but do you have something?
No, I don't have poetry with me, unfortunately, I don't have.
Do you remember? Even if it's in France, I'm sure Christine or somebody would be able to translate.
I don't have, I don't even know my poetry. If I don't have, no, I'm serious. I have a friend of mine, a poet from what we call in French Bretagne. It's not Great Britain, but it's a small Britain in France. And he's a poet, and he knows all his poetry. All. And you ask him poetry, and he's going to recite like this. and I can't, if I don't have a book of poetry, and I'm sorry, I can't.
No, but I think his book is very lyrical, and you must, if you get a chance, please do read it. I'm happy to lend a copy, but it is really, it really evokes feelings, and also because in the times in that which we are living today, against the background of the Ukrainian crisis, a lot of imagery from the book will feel very real to you. And I think it's also very necessary to read such kind of books because it makes you a good...
If you want, I could read just a small paragraph in the novel of French.
Yes.
Nothing.
Tell me which page it is. Is
Yes.
that something that I can probably translate it for them?
Okay, I'm trying to... Maybe the part where Shoshana sings. The page is in French.
Is it 208, 9?
No, 260 or something. This part in French when Shoshana is singing the Battle of Jericho.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if you know how
I
to...
read that. Yes, you can read that.
I don't know, but they are in the boat, and it's gonna be a revolt of the people. They want to. They don't know how they go. You know, it's the same with those boat stories. There is always a revolt, a thing like this. You know, America. I mean, I'm talking about the continent. When I say America, I say the continent. When I'm talking about United States, I say United States of America. And you know, the story of Christopher Columbus when he got to America. And we had also part of the people revolting because they don't know where Christopher, I was talking in Italy, Christopher Columbus took them, you know. And Shoshana, the Nigerian girl, how do you say it? To push. We have a very beautiful word in French that haranguer. You know, it's when you talk to a lot of people and you are trying to push them to do something.
Persuade.
Persuade? How do you say haranguer? You know, I don't know how to say that word in English. Haranguer. 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 When you talk to the people. Haranguer. H-A-R-A-N-G-E.
Inspire.
Sorry?
Inspire.
Yes, in some ways, it inspires, but not only inspire. You are making a discourse to the people. You are trying to push them to do something, you know, and you talk to them like.
So I think persuasion is the right word.
Persuasion,
Yes,
you
can say that.
She said that.
Thank you.
Yes.
And Sema tried to do it, but she didn't succeed. And Shoshana is going to sing. C'est à ce moment-là que la voix de Shoshana déchira le silence qui avait suivi les derniers mots de son ami. Une voix de tête forte, belle, naturelle. Elle n'avait jamais travaillé en vérité. Adolescente, elle faisait la fierté de ses parents, plus encore quand elle commençait à chanter dans les noces, les baïna et les notes de mitzvah. Sa renommée avait même dépassé les limites de leur petite communauté. Ceux d'Onitsha se disaient prêts à payer pour qu'elles viennent égayer leur cérémonie, mais cela n'intéressait pas plus que ça. Son seul plaisir dans l'affaire, c'était de donner du bonheur à ses semblables, de voir leurs yeux briller d'extase, qu'ils oublient l'espace d'une heure ou deux leurs petits soucis du quotidien. Son unique plaisir, c'était de chanter à la gloire de celui qu'on ne nomme pas, comme le leur avait enseigné le roi David. Les premières notes du gospel montèrent puissantes, gonflèrent, s'élargirent, emplirent chaque recoin de la cale, pénétrèrent les cœurs, l'air devint du coup plus léger, respirable. Joshua filled the battle of Jericho, Jericho, Joshua filled the battle of Jericho, and the walls were tumbling down. Hallelujah.
Would you like to translate it for the audience?
No, I think it's difficult to translate, not because I'm not a translator, that's the first reason, but also because the style of Louis Phillipe Dalembert is so poetic and lyric. So if you want to translate, or if I try to translate, it will be word to word. So, and you lose the meaning, you lose the music of the language. So I'm very pleased that you asked him to read in French, because you just listen to the music of the French language, even if you don't understand every word, even if you don't understand the meanings, you understand the voice. I mean, the power of the voice and the power of the rhythm of the style. And because, as you said before, he's also a poet, okay? And he's really a great poet. So when, we are in India, you have so many languages. Even if we don't understand the languages, we have some. I'm really moved when I listen to different Indian languages, even if I don't understand. But it's a music, and it's just a melody of your culture. Even if I don't speak Hindi, just tomato. But you know, so and because also Louis Philippe observed his identity from Haiti. He moved to so different countries with different religion, but in his work, novel works and poetry, he observed all these different culture and languages in his own French language and Creole. So it's why I refuse to translate.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm happy to now invite the audience to ask questions, and I request Arif to pass the mic.
Good evening. It's not only been a pleasure listening to you, but I have to say very reassuring. You know, it's strange, it's rare that one finds a feminist in a man. And I think what today what we need is not feminism. I'm a small-time writer. I truly believe we don't need feminism. We need feminists in men. And it's so heartening to listen to you. And then naturally the second question follows from the first. What gave you the sensitivity? You know, is it your upbringing?
The sense of?
Sensitivity. Yes, is it your mother? Is it your parenting? What is it that gave you such? I mean, I'm amazed at your humanness, you know, one. And it's almost like the Indian culture. I mean, I would be prone to believe that you must have been an Indian in your past life. Because you're talking about, you're talking there is no other. We are all one, which is the Vasudev Kutumbakam, that we in India believe that the whole world is one. So I'm sure you were a Vedic sage in your past life.
And I do accept that. I do accept it because I'm from the Caribbean, and when I say I'm from the Caribbean, you know, if you know the poet, the Nobel Prize is coming from St. Kitts, and his name is Dalembert. He's a very, very good, important poet, Nobel Prize, and one of the poems. Yes, there's a part of it where he say, I don't remember if say there were quote called, hold on a second, I'm going to try and, I know I'm talking about the stars in the poem, but he says that there is black in me, there is white in me, there is Indian, but whether I am nobody, whether I'm a nation, you know, and in the Caribbean, we came from so many parts of the world. The European killed the native, but the native before they died, they left a lot of things for us, as an heritage. And for example, in the cuisine, in the music, a lot of part of the thing. And we had after people coming from in the 18th century, for example, people coming from the Middle East, in Guadeloupe, Martinique, people coming from India, or people coming from China, in Haiti, or a lot of Cuba, etc. We are a piece of all of so many parts, you know. And to talk personally, even if I don't like to talk about myself, part of that sensibility, I think, is coming from the women I had the chance to have from the beginning of my life. And as I said when I'm joking, but I'm not totally joking, I had the chance to lose my father when I was 8 or 9 months. I don't remember exactly. My father died in difficult conditions. And I had a poem that said, I never said daddy, because he died. I didn't know how to speak, you know, I never said daddy. And I grew up with those women, my grandmother and my mother. And my grandmother was someone very, very sensitive and very strong. And she had respect for everyone, but she didn't make, difference between some people, respect to the class, to the social class, respect of if they have money, or if they have money. We knew some very, very difficult moment in my childhood where we could have just a few things to eat, just once in a day, for example. But I remember always my grandmother, and she always recommended or obliged us to leave just a little part for maybe someone who didn't have absolutely anything. And it was every day. I remember that scene that with 1,000, you know, when you are just ate once in the day, and at the end of the day you are starving. And with my cousin, we say, grandmother, nobody's coming, nobody's coming, because we want to eat the little part. She kept just for someone else, you know. I think that thanks to those women, I have what you call the feminine part. You know, for me, it's something natural. You know, it's not. I'm not. After that, when I was younger, I fight in feminist movement and things like this, but it wasn't necessary for me to do it because I grew up with those women, and they teach me by the pattern. You know, they were pattern for me. Education is not so many words. You don't have to speak so much. Education is the fact to observe. You observe when you are a child. You don't know how. You don't know how to speak. You don't have words to, but you observe. you see, what, like a, how do you say, éponge. How do you say éponge? I don't remember. Sorry?
Absorb.
You absorb a lot of things, you know, but you absorb a lot of things, but you don't know how to speak. And I saw those two women, not only them, because my mother had a lot of cousins, so I saw them. And my education came from them, you know, I just repeat what they teach to me, indirectly, that's all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Because I got the opportunity, so can I ask one? I think a question and answer both touch many aspects and dimensions. So I'll come on the other questions because the title, Home and the World, Migration, Identity, Exile, still exists in the home. So I'm mentioning two examples. So one, those the big communities, and Mughdha ji better know than me, here living in Rajasthan called Ghumattu, in India called denotified, and the France called Gypsy and Romas. They are migrant. So still they are facing lots of problems, and lots of problems on many accounts: social, legal, cultural, and music as well. And the second aspect I am also touching, because some communities came from Africa here in India. It is, I'm borrowing the word from the American, black American, I'm calling them the black Indian. In India, they have been called Siddhi. Their population is more than 250,000. Still in India, not touched by academician, not touched by. So I did something for the quite many years with them, but still lots of problem. I'm still as a person I'm facing. So because I definitely read your book and definitely got, because I've also got many insight with Mughdha ji I discussed. So how we can point it out? Because my idea is it is not only limited to the Indian state government. It should be the UN, UNDHR and something like that. So do you have any idea to give me? And definitely I'll read your book if in English. Thank you. Sorry, I've taken your time.
Thank you, but I don't know, it's a problem. You just revealed that problem to me. I don't know that problem for those people living here. And, but I mean, what I can say is that problem is the same everywhere in the world, you know, because part of our humanity is that fear I was talking before, you know. We need to reject the other, to be ourselves, unfortunately. But in the same time, we don't have the right to accept that fear we have deep inside of us. You know, we were talking a lot about the United States before. Barack Obama, President of the United States, when he first made campaign to become president, and he had to stop the campaign to go to see his grandmother, his white grandmother, and died. And after he made a very beautiful speech about color racism, about the fact to accept or to not accept the other. And he confessed that his grandmother, his white grandmother, who loved him so much, we loved him. And his grandmother said, you know, I used, when I used to see a black man, I used to change the part of the street because I was afraid. And Barack Obama is what we call in the Caribbean métis, you know, a black part and a white part. And that fear, that white woman who loves his grandson and grandson is half black, and she confessed to him that when she used to say black man just across the street because she had fear, and that problem exists everywhere. You know, if we don't go back, deep inside the fear that we have inside of us, it would be impossible to resolve. That problem. But I can't give you an opinion with respect to the problem you mentioned, because I don't know it, but I just can speak generally. And with that example from Barack Obama, that speech is very, very important speech, very beautiful also. And you can find it on internet, on YouTube, or I don't know. That's just what I can say. I'm sorry.
Hello. Yes. Good evening, sir. My question is related to the migrants. As you told that you are being a migrant. So, what is the psychology when a person crosses a border? What is the psychology when he will reach towards a new destination? What are the ideals that he proposed towards in his mind? So, like in Africa, Zulu tribes, Maasais, they wanted to go to the Europe for a better life. So, there is a psychology of fear, plus there is a psychology of aspirations. So, my question is, what inside in their mind, as you told that you are being a migrant. So, what is the psychology?
I can't answer for everyone, you know, and as I said at the beginning, I'm not a common migrant, you know. Even if I didn't have a fellowship, I had to work to pay my studies in France, but I consider myself like a privilegé, I would say in French, you know. And but those persons you are talking about cross, for example, the borders to come to Europe, and when they want to come to Europe, what I used to say, for example, those persons, they don't want to go to Europe. They are escape from something. Because human being, you have very few people traveling for pleasure. You know, I know tourism, there's a lot of tourism now, you know, people enjoy it. I'm not talking about that kind of travel. You know, when you decide to go outside, you don't do it because, okay, I just want to see the world. I'm escaping from something. Because I don't feel safe or well in my own country, in the country where I was born. You know, I'm escaped from climate change. I'm escaped from poverty, from dictatorship, from I don't know, so many things. You know, but people are escaping. And so when they are escaping because, as I said also before, they can sell the few things they have to escape, to go over there, to get once in a while a better life, because they are just escaping and looking for something else, you know? So it's the reason why, for example, if they can have their goal, their objective is to be to reach Europe. But there are so many things can happen. They want to go, for example, I don't know, to England, but they are not going to England, they are going to stay in Italy. They want to go to France, and they can't enter in France, they are going in Germany. They don't have, relationship with Germany, with Switzerland, with I don't know, Norway, but they are going there because they are escaping from something. They are looking for a better life. So when they arrive in the place, not just in the place they were looking for. When they escape finally, when you have people coming from Africa, coming from the Middle East, and they come to Europe, they feel like completely, I don't know, it's a double sensation. A double sensation because first you feel happy because finally you arrive, even if it's not your destination, I mean your final destination, finally you arrive. But at the same time, you feel completely, how to say vide, I don't remember how to say vide. Empty, yes, no, thank you. You feel empty inside because you lost something, you know, because you didn't decide just to go, okay, I'm going because I just want to see the world. I'm going because I couldn't stay where I was born. I couldn't stay for so many reasons. And now, okay, I want to go to Europe. I don't know in which country exactly. Okay, maybe I dream about France, I dream about England, I dream about, I don't know, Germany. But finally, they accepted me in Italy. Okay, I'm going to stay in Italy, even if I don't have a relationship with Italy. I'm going to stay in Italy. I feel happy because I was escaping from something. Now I can stay. Okay, I'm not escaping anymore. I'm happy. But at the same time, when I look behind me, I say I lost a lot of things. I lost I know my culture, part of my identity, my language, I know so many things, and I have to build another life. You know, just to. I don't like that word because it's a connotation of so many things, but it's as you feel born again. You know, I say I don't like that word because you have in the United States the Christian born again, they are most intolerant. You know, that's how it is. And you feel like you born again. You know, it's a sensation. It's a sensation. So you can just. It's the reason why so many people are crying or so many people. I have. It's not a friend. You know, we just met twice. He's a slammer. He's something like 45 years. He lives in France. His name is Diamanka, and he came to France with his parents when he was something like 1 or 2 years old. He's French, more French than African. His parents were from Mali, and the parents, his parents were illiterate, you see, when you don't know how to read, and his father did something very important, and he learned to know how to register a lot of things he used to see in the French television, and he imagined it's very important, and he registers for his son. And for example, he registered a lot of things with respect to Mali, and just for his son. And he want to give like a gift all those things to his son, but he didn't even know how to read a newspaper, how to sign his name. But he could do it, and when that guy now is a poet, he's a slammer, and when he's talking about his father, his grandfather, his grandmother, is just what thanks to what he received from his father, you know, because his father had fear to lose everything. He has fear to lose everything, and just he want to give something to his son, and he didn't know how to write, so he talks and he tells stories, just tells stories. And nowadays, that guy could use all those things that his father gave to him. You know, it's a very strange sensation, but it's part of humanity, part of mankind's story.
No more questions actually, but
If we have time.
We call it a quit now, but join us for tea outside if you are happy to ask your questions over tea. Because I think we've taken a lot of time, then we realized that it was very interesting talking to you. Thank you so much. It's a deep
Sense of gratitude on behalf of the IS Literary Society, Jawahar Kala Kendra, and of course Delhi, the French Institute in India, and the Alliance Francais in Jaipur. And thanks very much to Christine and Sanjana. Sanjana has been doing all the dirty, heavy work, lifting, coordination, which is endless and thankless, and also to Sudhamni who's here. To everybody who's come here today in support of something which is very, very important. So I think in support of humanity, to build a sisterhood of values where we connect on the basis of how we feel in our hearts, the thymos, the problem that Nietzsche said, that in the soul of everyone is the need for recognition and acceptance. So I think we are doing this conversation because we believe that every one of us has this need to be recognized, not to be invisible like the virus. So thank you very much, sir. It's indeed an honor.